Alrighty, so this week's progress. I have the whole world laid out. I've got all of the sections lined up and fixed into the grid system, so it's all working properly. Any of these black squares you are not able to move through. Any of the checkerboard squares, white squares, purple squares are all movable areas that you can go through. So there are the 6 kingdoms here, each for an element, and then the starter area in the center, which also functions as the final dungeon entrance at the end of the game. So the way it works is you have to go through a specific area, in this case where these arrows are, kind of where I'm looking here with the mouse. This is where the fire dungeon entrance is. There are 2 entrances. When you go through here, it will teleport you over to the dungeon entrances over here, which I will show in a moment. The white squares along the map are cities or outposts for each kingdom. These pink squares between kingdoms are the only areas that you can go to a adjacent kingdom, so you have to go through those pink squares to get to the other ones. The other ones will be blocked off by terrain. And I kind of wanted to have these general shapes outlined for where I can put some treasures that are static in the world. So, like in these areas, there's a couple places where you have to go a very specific route to get to the end of the route. You get to the end of this little maze thing. And that would be where I'd be placing some static treasure in the world that you can go find. Then that's really what I've got going for the overworld aspect. As far as why are you not zooming in? Come on. There we go. So I just wanted to show off also how everything's functioning currently. So, as I've explained before, this bottom one is what is actually in view. This is kind of the Unity editor, just so you can see the map of the actual world. So, up here, this is a black square, you're not able to pass through it. So going up into it doesn't let you pass through. Going to any checkerboard square allows you to go through and transition to the next section. And again, you can't move into any squares that are blackened out. Down here is where the entrance is for the fire dungeon. So going into this little trigger area teleports you over to the fire dungeon here. And now you are able to go through the fire dungeon. And these just teleport you back and forth. I have a bunch of all of the dungeon entrances are in and functioning. So you can traverse the entire map, which is what I was trying to hope for this week's goal, which is great. That I'm glad that I got it done. I think the next steps are going to be designing some sort of UI elements, maybe getting just kind of some stuff on screen so it looks a little bit more obvious. Definitely need to devise how I am going to show the map. Pretty sure I want that to be something that you have to look at separately and you don't necessarily know where you are right then. I think the idea that I'd like to shoot for is having each terrain piece, or area, I guess, kind of have a distinct feel so that it's obvious where you are in relation to the rest of the world, which is going to take a lot of work, but I will see how that goes. There might have to be like a mini map or something that's a little bit more distinctive, but I'll see. As it is now, the character is probably a little too big. This does seem like it's taking up a lot of the screen, having him here. I'll probably end up making him a much smaller size. I think maybe even the size of these little directional things I have here would be a better fit, but I'll see how that ends up looking in maximized when it's bigger across the entire screen. Another big thing that I'd like to start working on is the loading and unloading of each section. So the way I want it to work is that each section is going to have some terrain that may or may not be destructible, but each terrain piece is going to be in a specific static spot in each section. So each section will have its own list of objects in that section. So terrain, water sources, fire sources, whatever else is in there. It's going to know where everything is. When you go into the section, it will load those things in and put them in, and then unload whatever stuff was in the previous section. So basically delete everything from the section you were in and then load the new section. Um, and the main reason I want to do it that way is because I want sort of destructible terrain for some of the spells and abilities. So I want it to be, it's going to be fairly heavy because there are going to be lots of little things that need to be taking up time and CPU space. So hopefully having everything be contained to one specific section, the one that you're in, will cut down on the overhead of that. We'll see how it ends up functioning. I also would like to have sections keeping track of spawn points. So each section is going to know where it can spawn enemies, and then it's going to have a list of enemies that it can spawn in each of those sections. So there's going to be a little bit of variety when you're going through an area. It won't always be exactly the same enemies in the exact same spot. It's going to be a very limited number of things that can be spawning anywhere, but they might change up where they end up spawning. And of course, there will be some static enemies that are just always going to be spawning in one place and in one area and whatever. But yeah, that's I think really that the plan for next week is to have some design stuff done. So I probably won't have much for a video, and I will attempt to get some stuff working in game. One of the other, I really want to have the world functioning before I continue on. So making the, as it is now, the whole world is traversable and everything works, and you can go anywhere and get back from any of the dungeons. But I would like to have it so that they are loading things in whenever you go in, even just as a sample of a couple different squares, so that I can see that they're loading and unloading properly. Because it's going to be a lot of work getting all of that in, that's really just going to be something that I want to set up and have working and know it's going to work before I go further. And then I will probably finish working on some of the inventory stuff. Another thing, I did this a couple weeks ago, but I have all of the, you can see an enormous amount of uh, weapons and armor all in. They are fairly basic right now, and they're going to need a lot of work to get working properly, but I have all of the melee things in. I have a very basic melee system in that isn't working currently because I have to finish the inventory system for it to work properly, but I have all of my weapons in, all of my armors in, and at least a framework for them to start working. But yeah, I think there's a lot of progress going on. I'm really happy with how everything's turning out. Yeah, cool. All right, I'll have another video next week.